Welcome to this week's episode of Dear Frannie. I am so excited to be joined by JT Thiessen and Maureen Anders. I'm going to let them introduce themselves, but first, I'm your host, Catherine LeBlanc, Fractional Chief Marketing Officer, serving brands that need support in setting their marketing foundations. So, JT, let's start with you.
Thanks, Catherine. As she said, I'm JT. I'm the Chief Development Officer for a company called Home Franchise Concepts, and we are a umbrella company that owns 10 home services franchises, about 2,700 franchisees in all, and I've been there for about 20 years, so glad to be here.
Awesome. Maureen?
Thanks, Catherine. I'm Maureen Anders. I'm the co-founder and CEO of a company called AR Workshop, and we're a do-it-yourself art studio. So it's art as entertainment, and we teach hands-on classes to create home decor from raw materials while sipping on wine.
Sipping on wine, I love it. Thank you so much. I am excited to get to today's question, but first we're going to go around the room and talk about what we are reading. So Maureen, I will kick off with you.
Yeah, this is great. So I'm always on the go. I'm a mom of 2 boys. So sitting down to read a book is not always in the cards for me. So I'm big on Audible. But one of my favorites that I think would be helpful for people to hear about is called The Work Week. It's the Wolf Report newsletter. Not sure if you all have heard about it, but it's a weekly newsletter that comes out, and it's basically the audience is entrepreneurs, investors, operators, and they do weekly insight and analysis on the franchise industry. So they will recap certain brands to show you their performance, their background, the cost to start up, royalty, brand fund, all those things, just as a franchisor, so you can see what other brands in the landscape are doing. They have a lot of great takeaways, industry news, and they also have a podcast that goes along with that, and just small little facts that are great to read about what's going on in the franchise industry. So again, it's called the Wolf Report.
The Wolf Report. Is that WOLF?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. I love email recaps.
Comes to my email and I just scan it, and you always learn something new.
Yeah, I love it. JT, what about you?
I'm actually reading a book that I've been really excited to get my hands on for a long time. It's written by Alicia Miller, and it's called Big Money in Franchising. And she and I started talking about her writing this book a couple of years ago, and I was fortunate enough to have several interviews with her along the way, and was really excited about the topics coming out. It really focuses on the differences that have happened now that private equity has come into franchising and what that means for all of us. And it's really a topic that I don't think anyone's really covered at any length. And it's a fascinating book. It takes you all the way back to the beginning of private equity and to where we are today, and also where she thinks this is probably going to go as well. And she's got feedback from a lot of industry giants in the franchising space. And so it's something that I think as anyone at a level in franchising that wants to learn about where this thing is going with private equity, it's a must read, in my opinion.
That's awesome. I mean, that, when you think about even the conference topics that I'm seeing at the different conferences that we have, obviously AI is the talk of the town, but there's consistently a PE private equity session, whether it's how do you get private equity, how do you leverage private equity, how do you work with private equity. It's in at every single conference. And so certainly it's a hot topic, and what you just described is absolutely not addressed yet. So it sounds like it's a perfect timing.
Yeah, it's a great book.
So I am reading a book called Building a Story Brand. So it's a marketing book. There's plenty of them to choose from out there. But what I like about the structure of this book is that it repositions, in my opinion, your brand as not the hero of the story. And I think that's something that we all need to hear, especially, working with visionaries and working with founders, and Maureen, I'm sure that you can attest to this. You eat, breathe, and live this brand. And I think sometimes we have to remind ourselves, we're not the hero here. Our guest is the hero. How do we fit the story arc of what our guest or customer is going through? And how do we position our brand to be that, sidekick? And maybe not sidekick, maybe it's, teacher or advisor, but we have to find a place where we are serving a purpose for the customer to be the hero of their own story. Because I'm sure we're all human, we are the hero of our own story. And sometimes when we're so close to a brand, that brand becomes our hero too. And I think we can make some really poor decisions when our brand is the hero of our story.
I love that book, Catherine. I read it too. And we had somebody, a story brand expert, come in and help us with our website. And I mean, it's amazing. Like, you got to figure out what problem you're solving and position it. And it is, I think, very worthwhile to read.
It's a good framework too. You know, anytime I love frameworks, anytime I'm trying to tackle a problem, I'm like, give me the roadmap so I can fill in. And that's exactly what this book does. Well, good stuff. All right, well, let's jump into our question for today. What is my role in getting my franchisees funded? I have several interested parties. I think my process is nailed down, at least good enough for this point. But if they need money, what is my obligation to support them in finding that money? And are there tools I can provide to them? I'm gonna leave it up to you guys. Who wants to tackle this first?
I can, it's fine. Yeah, one of the things that you have to have if you're going to be responsibly putting franchisees in to the business is making sure that their runway is long enough to get off the ground, right? You may think your brand is the best airplane, but if the runway is too short, they don't have enough capital, it's not going to do anybody any good. And so the first thing before you even get into finding the money is making sure that your FDD is saying you've got enough in there. Like I see a lot of people say, listen, I got to try to keep this amount of capital required down low, so that it fits into a 7A loan, or so that it fits into something someone can just write a check for. And inevitably that's a bad thing. It doesn't work out, because if they need more capital, they shouldn't be finding out a year in that they just didn't have enough, because it's a lot harder to get once you're in the business than it is before you get into the business in a lot of cases. So we want to make sure that those numbers are right. And then I think from there, it's having good partners that understand your business, understand your brands, and can help with the different sources for lending. I don't like to just give one. I like for them to have a couple choices. And so we've got a couple folks that we've worked with for a long time. There's two companies, Fran Fund and Benetrends, that we use a lot when people are looking to roll over their 401ks and use that money to invest in themselves in the business that way. And then we use a company called First Financial almost primarily when people want to go the SBA route. And that's really their expertise. So we typically will refer those three companies to someone coming in to make sure that they're getting the attention that they need and that they're getting, a long enough runway.
So JT, I want to dissect that a little bit, because something that you said hit a like a trigger point for me. In that, as we're crafting FDDs and as we're crafting the story that we're telling our franchise candidates, right? Because your brand, your franchise development work is going to be an extension of your brand, and so you're telling your candidates a story about your brand. It's a little bit different, you hook them in with the consumer story, and then you sell them on the business prospects. When we're putting together what those costs of build out look like and what capital we want them to have that strong of a runway, it is hard to, in business, you're competing against one another, right? So the restaurant is competing against another restaurant, or the, home service, the plumber is competing against the plumber. And so, a point of differentiation can often be, well, it's cheaper to open mine than it's cheaper to open theirs. And so you should, you should come over here. To your point on having enough runway, I do find that brands can put themselves in a pinch when they're not completely transparent and honest about what the costs are to open something versus what you want it to be or what you wish it could be in the FDD. And in today's environment, and it's gotten a little bit better over the last year, but in today's construction environment where costs have just skyrocketed, and we are, we talked about responsible franchising in the last episode. When we think about the amount that you need to invest in order to be successful and what that return on investment is, and this formula that we've been told that we have to meet in order for us to be attractive to franchise candidates, I'm seeing a lot of friction there of what it actually costs to open, what you're actually going to be able to make in return, and then being forced into some boxes that we've just, pre-decided are there. Sorry, I got on a little soapbox, so stop there and see if anybody is, has that same kind of feeling.
Yeah, Catherine,
Yeah,
I think, oh, go
go
ahead. Sorry,
ahead.
Jake.
Go ahead,
Go ahead.
Maureen. No.
No, everything you said, JT, I completely agree 100%. I think, we started out, I'm the co-founder, so we started out franchising very early on and realized like it's not best to be the cheapest, right? Like you may be competing for a magazine ranking of the cheapest franchise to open, but that doesn't mean it's the best. And we learned, leave extra padding because there's always unexpected expenses that come up. And it's a vicious cycle. If your franchisee runs out of money, then they are going to cut costs with marketing, and then their performance is going to go down, and it's going to be this vicious cycle, and it just never ends well. So we learned early on to pad it. Another thing is, like you said, we weren't finance experts, but we wanted to show our franchise perspectives that we have these resources. That's why you're coming to us, is because of our connections with vendors in the franchise industry. And so if we can provide them with these great resources, like you said, Fran Fund and Benetrends, that's going to be like someone else is helping hold their hand that's an expert in finance. And it helps us too, because Fran Fund and Benetrends, they come back to us and they say, hey, this is a great candidate. Like, did you know that this person has this, and this setup? They're going to be a shoe-in. They're going to have plenty of assets to be able to operate and run this business. Or, hey, did you know they filled out your financial application, but they didn't tell you about XYZ? So it kind of gives you that transparency and insight into your franchise perspectives as well.
That's valuable feedback that you're able to get from those partners.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I think I was going to say the same thing. I don't want to be the cheapest. I want to be the best. And if you're looking for the cheapest, you're probably not a good fit for us. And so I think, again, not making sure that they've got more than enough capital to get to profitability is just irresponsible. And you're playing a very short-term game. If you're trying to compete based on squeezing your items 6 and 7. And so, yeah, we try to, again, make sure that there's more than enough in there. And the other piece where it comes in handy as well, I don't know if you've had a lot of resales, Maureen, in your system, but these partners can be really helpful when it comes time to getting funding for resales, because that's a whole different animal. The business has got to be valued, and there's got to be a lot more paper work involved in terms of looking at balance sheets and P&Ls and everything else. And that's a great resource for us, as well as the size of our system, we do quite a few resales every year as well. So having a partner that you can count on in those cases is important for the health of your system long term.
Yeah, JT, we have had a lot of transfers. And one thing I've learned, and I'd love your take on this, is when you're doing a transfer, you have a franchisee that wants to sell their store or their business. They find a perspective, or you find a perspective. They come in, they get funding, but they're funding the purchase price typically, and they need to know, they're not doing a full build out. So the FDD is not exactly the number that they need to look at. They need to understand, like, how much do I need month to month? So JT, how many months of operating capital do you recommend or require for your franchisees that are transferring?
Yeah, it's a good question. And a lot of it depends on the P&L. Like, are they already profitable? And if we put the debt service in, will they still be profitable? Or are they buying a turnaround project? In which case, then we have to, we can't give them pro formas for the business and then tell them what it will earn and what it won't. But we can certainly give them the tools to understand, how long it's going to take to get to profitability, take the debt service out that you're borrowing to start the business, and then that's the number that you need to come up with, and then probably add a month or two just to be
Right.
on the safe side.
Yeah.
But that's sort of what we do.
That's good.
Yeah, I was gonna say too, on a turnaround, you also have to think about not just, taking the current P&L, but then saying, hey, what does ideal look like? And adding in some cost, because like you said, when a franchisee or any business starts to get in trouble, right? First cut is marketing, second cut is labor, third cut is, you're starting to skimp on your product. And so how far down did they get before they're selling? And then how far up do you need to build it up? And because that's gonna cost dollars.
I think as a franchisor, it's our responsibility to at least have a little insight into what they're walking into, though, right? To give them insight. Like, is management mad and they're going to walk out the minute someone new comes in? They're just waiting for a bonus, or does everyone love it and they just need some new leadership because there's an illness or something along that? There's a lot of different reasons why, right? But I think you, as a franchisor, can certainly say, "Hey, let's make sure that we've got enough to cover 3 months of hiring new people because we're going to be in that kind of situation if that's the case."
Those are great insights on resales. Oh, yeah, and resales are a whole nother piece too that are necessary in the franchise life cycle that we should all be prepared for. I do want to dig in a little bit. You both mentioned Fran Fund and Benetrends, and so I wanted to ask, are those organizations that you can reach out to and say, hey, I'm starting to franchise. Do you want to be one of my funding partners? And then it's off to the races. Are there any qualifications that you need to meet before you become a partner with one of those folks?
That's a great
Maureen.
question. We met them at one of the conferences, IFA. I don't know if you have to be SBA approved, but they were very great to work with. We were a startup and they wanted to help us and hold our hand, and we've been very loyal in referring both those companies. So I don't think there's any major requirements to my knowledge.
No, there aren't. They just want to make sure that your model's strong, though. They might do a little bit of due diligence just because they don't want to help people take $300,000 out of their 401k to only have it disappear. That's not their fault, but they certainly don't want to see that happen. So they want to make sure that the business is solid, but they're not going to do a lot of due diligence in that regard, and there's no cost or anything like that to be associated with them. And they take great care of people. I've been using them for 20 years, and without incident. And I think that's the one thing that a lot of people too aren't aware of, is that there is this program out there called the ROBS program, which allows people to use their 401k penalty free and tax free to invest in a business. And it's a great way for someone that doesn't want to take a lot of debt out to go about and getting into franchising when maybe they think they've got to wait until they've got that money squirreled away to start it, right? And so you can have that money work for you rather than waiting until you're a retirement age to take it out.
That is awesome. And the other thing I wanted to dig in with you guys was around SBA funding. JT, you mentioned you had a partner on the SBA funding side of things. Curious as to, do you recommend finding one partner to partner with on SBA? Or is it more about being SBA ready as a brand to then hand over to your franchisee to do the process themselves?
I think the more help you can give the franchisees, the easier the process is, because it's a challenging, and it's only getting more challenging. The length of time it's taking to get even the easiest SBA loans done is increasing pretty dramatically. At least we're finding. Again, Benetrends, Fran Fund, they can do SBA loans as well, and so typically we'll give them 3 companies to choose from. We've just got one company that has done hundreds and hundreds of these for us. And so they know us, they know our process. And so the franchisees find that it's very simple to just jump into there and let them take it.
And is that bank that you mentioned like a national bank, or is it? I'm just
First Financial,
yeah.
They're not actually a bank. They basically work with banks. And so they package up the SBA loans, and then they have a few select banks that they work with. So they're basically about getting people through the SBA process and getting it in front of the bank and getting approved. And that's where their expertise is.
Love that. Because it is a scary process. If you've never done it before, it's you don't know where to get started, and they ask a bunch of, what I would call open-ended questions that you're like, well, what's the right answer? And so having someone guide you, I think, is really smart to partner with. I think to your point too, knows your business. You want an advocate in that process to be advocating for for your business, the strength of your business, and you're not just, it's not just a random small business owner saying have a great idea, right? No, these are proven processes. This is a proven business. Having an advocate for that process within I think is smart.
Well, the SBA's they keep score, and they know who's paying their loans off and who isn't. And if your brand's franchisees are defaulting on their SBA loans, you're going to find it harder and harder and harder to get financing for your franchisees because the SBA won't fund them. So you have to be really careful too that the people that you're bringing into your brand that are using SBA financing are going to be the kind of people that you think are going to pay their loans, because that actually hurts your whole brand over time if that keeps going on. And I've seen it happen where we've looked to acquire brands and I find out through the due diligence that they're not SBA approved because they've had too many defaults over time, and that can really hurt the growth of a brand.
That's a great point. And I think we started off this conversation with how do I help my franchisees get funding? But what we're learning is you've got to make sure that your franchisees are in a stable financial place, because if they're not, long-term damage is inevitable. So long-term damage in that they won't be able to sustain and operate their business because they don't have a long enough runway, or long-term damage in that if they do start defaulting on their loans, then you're ruining that opportunity for other franchisees and potentially starting to put some nails in the coffin of the brand. And so it's we often talk about when I talk to franchise folks or talk to founders that, like Maureen in your case, where, you've built your brand, you've gone through the mistakes of bringing on the wrong quote unquote owners. And most of the time when we talk about the wrong owners, we're talking about bad culture fits or bringing on someone who doesn't have the business acumen that we might expect in someone about to jump into the business. But rarely do we talk about, in a transparent way, the funding part of it, the financial part of it, of bringing in the wrong owners because we wanted to say yes, and they gave us a $25,000 check, which I know is 45 now, and but didn't have the capital to really keep it going. So I think that this was a really good kind of transparent conversation around that. Do you guys have any final thoughts on that topic before we wrap up for today?
I think we covered it.
Okay, good deal. I do too. I think that again, as a emerging franchisor, I think they'll find a lot of value in this conversation to kind of keep their eyes wide open on what to do and what not to do. So thank you so much for sharing that expertise and your experiences with our Dear Frannie audience. And I ask the audience to tune in next time, share this episode with your friends and family if you found it helpful. And we will see you next time. Thank you guys so much for joining me.
Thanks, Catherine.